This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So we're here to do Winter's Tangents, which is the in-between Winter's Heart and Crossroads, right? It's kind of in between because the books are kind of happening at the same time, and we're taking that final chapter and smearing it, the final chapter of Winter's Heart, and smearing it across the first 20-ish chapters of Crossroads of Twilight, not including the prologue. And so, yeah, this is sort of when we're finishing that book, even though we still have that last chapter that we're gonna dig into with the cleansing. So we figured this is the good time to go back and sort of review the last 6-ish months that we've been working on this book.
Yeah, and our guests today are Lillijen Antipodes, our official episode artistic creator person, self-appointed, actually. I don't know if that makes it official. Yeah. Self-appointed art creator.
It kind of happened.
Yeah, it's just, well, that's how I ended up as co-host. So, you know, it's a thing. And then also JediPants, who spends a lot of time in chat with us and has subbed on the artistic train one time as well. And that was very cool. So welcome to you both.
Yeah, a huge thank you to both of you for that artwork. It's been a real pleasure to see that artwork sort of happen in real time as we're doing the episode, and then to have that as something to promote as opposed to trying to pull from some artists or something, you know, online that's vaguely related to the chapter. It's been really nice to have that kind of effort and interest put into the episodes as we do them. It's really rewarding to see those at the end of every recording.
Yeah, I just scrolled back this morning and I was like, oh, this is the really dodgy sort of like podcast icon I did up for, I think it was Aradia, which is podcast in the noob, because you were talking about doing a beginner's podcast and how to set the thingamajiggy up. Mm-hmm. And someone said podcast in the noob, and I just made a really dodgy little icon for it. And then it was the breakdown of what happened post-series. So I've accidentally sort of done a whole book and not realized.
That's how we get you.
Yeah, that is how I get you, yeah. Aradia's been on that train.
So, yes, good fun.
And JediPants, you just have been in the chat just, like, religiously.
Usually, yeah. But for the one time I took over, like, I think Lillijen said like a month early, oh, I'm not going to be here for this one. And I was like, so I spent like a few hours in like 2 weeks leading up to it. I was like, okay, I need to get something together. And I was laboring over it. And like, I think this is as good as it's going to get. So.
It was perfect. It was lovely.
Wow. It was wonderful. Yeah, it was really wonderful.
But I just found out from one of my cohorts in my doctoral program that teachers can register for Canva for free. And I did not know that at the time. So I submitted like hey, can you register me sort of deal. I did that yesterday. And I'm like, nice. Hey, if I need a sub again in the future, at least this way I get all the pro features. Hopefully.
Schmancy.
Mine's paid, but I get not-for-profit prices because I use it a lot for my choir.
Nice.
I do all of our online advertising. I make all of our posters and all of that sort of stuff because no one else is apparently willing to put things together a lot of the time. They look at computers and go, eh. And I'm like, I have no what I'm doing. Click, 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 drag, drag. Bigger, smaller, change that text. I'm just making it up. It's fine.
So, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't start by asking you, you know, how'd you find Wheel of Time? How'd you find the podcast? And why don't we start with JediPants on that one?
I found Wheel of Time, I want to say in 2005. So my now ex-boyfriend got me into Song of Ice and Fire series, and his best friend was more into Wheel of Time than he was, but it was kind of like a bouncing off point. And I have through, I think, the 10th book in paperback, maybe through the 11th book in paperback. No, through the 10th, because I picked up before Jordan died. So I ended up catching up before Jordan died. So, but I was not into the fandom at all until it was like, oh, I liked the books, and now I'm rereading Aragon, and the beginning of Aragon is so similar to the beginning of Wheel of Time. I'm like, no wonder why when I was younger, when I just didn't have everything in my brain because of the podcast, I'm like, I was like, no wonder why I'm so confused, because they both start off with death and the kid dragging an uncle across the snow and stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's all the same. But with regards to the podcast, that same friend who got me into Wheel of Time reached out to me it was in July of 21, and it was for Jordan Con, and he sends me a YouTube clip it was Matt Hatch, and he was interviewing a bunch of people, and he goes, Brandon Sanderson's on at this time. So I was watching, but I was also watching a little bit before then, a little bit after. And I think, Seth, you were on like right after. And I was like, there are podcasts. Oh, cool. This one's about spoilers. Oh, cool. And then a month and a half later, I caught up to 300 plus episodes, and
wow. Wow.
No, maybe it was 2.5 months, but and then I was like, all right, so, it was the first thing I did with Patreon. I never did Patreon before. I'm like, I like podcasts, or I like this, I like that. I'm not going to pay for it though. But for you guys, I was like, I must. And then by the end, I was like, yes, all right, Patreon it is. So as soon as I finished, I did the Patreon, and it was just after a spoiler con. So, and now I'm here.
Wow. Cool.
The binge is always amazing when people are like, yeah, I caught up with 5 years of history in 2.5 months. I'm just like, wow, you must know things about me that I have completely forgotten.
I've forgotten too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. That's what I wanted to hear. But it's so much compressed like that. It's just amazing. And of course, then Lillijen, how did you find the podcast? And of course, before that, the books.
Like JediPants, I found the books through an ex. So I just moved out of home, and it was just in the beginning of university, so I was still reading books by the pound. And he had a lot of the old ones, and the older covers and stuff. So I was like, well, there's a lot of these, and they're real thick. And I'd read fantasy before I started my fantasy journeys doing Dragonlance. My older sister owned Dragonlance, so when I went over to her house, because she's 13 years older than me, so she was sort of married already, when I went over to their house, I'd go to their bookcase and I'd pull out the next Dragonlance book that I hadn't read yet. So I found Wheel of Time, would have been my first year of university, so 2002. Read through all of those, and then when we broke up, I don't know why I rebought them. Maybe I saw some in a second-hand shop, and I was like, oh, maybe I should buy all these because I really liked them. And the series is clearly not finished yet, so I'm going to want to reread them at some point. So I now have them all in paperback, a lot of the sweet covers, and then just the plain ones with the rings on them. And then I found the podcast sort of arse backwards. I joined Twitter and then found a podcast that some authors were doing about, like, fiction tropes and all that sort of stuff. So I joined all of their Twitters and I started supporting them briefly on Patreon. But then sort of through that, I was like, what other podcasts about things that I like are going to be out there? And then I was like, well, what things do I like? And I was like, well, maybe if I can find a Wheel of Time podcast, I can reread alongside a podcast. Which I didn't actually end up doing because I just binged the entire podcast instead.
It does. Some people have said it saves them a reread. They can just binge, like, basically consume it alongside up with us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I read ADHD style, so chunks of paragraphs at a time. So I miss so much as I'm reading. But that just means every time I reread, I get new bits. So the podcast is just like the speed run of that, where I get all the new bits and the things that I haven't thought about because I've accidentally read like 8 lines of text in one swoosh. And I've just missed a whole bunch of details. So it's actually really nice to listen to the podcast and go, oh, I didn't realize. And I spend like 80% of every podcast going, oh, that's interesting.
That's lovely.
I love that feeling. And, that's kind of, again, one of the reasons I love doing it myself, because I get that feeling because I'm slowing down and reading one chapter at a time and doing the discussion. And, there's not very many episodes that don't go by where during the notes, I don't realize at least 1 or 2 things I didn't realize before. And then usually during discussion, there's a few other things that are sprinkled in there. So it's a brilliant strategy for knowing everything there is to know about a book. Now I go back and re-listen, and it's a totally different experience now, going back and re-listening to the first episodes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. That just sounds painful.
But so I guess what I've learned from this conversation so far is that the way Wheel of Time spread is by dating, that we go out and date people. And that's the only way they'll trust us enough to read a 14-book series.
This puts into new perspective, so I got the books from a boy I was crushing on and who I assumed didn't like me. The evidence of this discussion would suggest that perhaps maybe he did.
I feel like you have to like someone enough. If you're going to recommend Wheel of Time to them, they have to have all the right sort of aspects that, for me at least, it's like, okay, I'm going to like you, right? Like, no matter what. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this was middle school, so
right.
I don't know that the process was quite so well thought out, but maybe it wasn't a one-sided crush if he was suggesting these books to me and excited that I was reading them. Maybe
the sharing of mutual interests. Yeah,
it's almost like that's a normal thing to do or something.
It's almost like that's how people flirt.
Mutual info dumping is a love language. I stand by this statement.
Totally is.
No, I've got Never on, she's about to finish, she's on the roller coaster ending of book 5, and she's very excited about it. So that's how far I've managed to get her. So yeah, dating to convert people to Wheel of Time. It's a thing. Yeah. Yeah. Also, shout out to the brown Aja being very well represented here in this here chat. This is all brown Aja except for Seth, because he just floats everywhere and nowhere. But, I still consider myself white as my primary Aja.
Yeah, so you're brown only by default of being sort of Amerlin-esque in your overlordship.
Right. I do have to. Well, I'm the owner of the server, so I see into all of the Ajas. I can't not.
Whites are also brown adjacent, so
that's true. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah. I am very much married to a white.
We need the facts to use the logic on, right? And so there's a certain symbiosis between,
symbiosis,
between the two, dynamo. I think, right?
I think I'm married to a white too. Yeah, he's much more logical than I am. So, 2 browns here. We're both spaced out.
Excellent.
I think I'm dating the Lord of Chaos. Not sure she has an Aja.
You might definitely have a chaotic warder on your hands rather than a Aes Sedai.
Honestly, what I have is Gray, because she's an excellent negotiator and socializer, right? So that's the whole. Not the Gray as the represented.
She plays a good Elaine, who should be Gray. So that does as
we've discussed.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the bringing people together and negotiating, that sort of thing. So I know, Aradia, you said you had a bit of an outline. I also have a few things that I just noticed change during the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, so my general format for tangents is always kind of what happened over the book and what happened to us over the course of the book, because, you know, it usually takes us several months. And yeah, in this case, it's been since June. So everyone, like, you know, rewind your minds back to June. Like, where were you in June? That's where we were last time that we did tangents. So I just kind of thought we could revisit the chapters very briefly, and whatever was going on in our lives over that.
Is this the first book where you have edited every single episode that's come out? Because didn't I edit some of the early Path of Daggers episodes? Because they were coming out like during the early show and stuff like that. So I think I hadn't transitioned over to you quite yet in the beginning of Path of Daggers.
Much like with the whole book series, I have no idea when events happen. No idea which book certain things happen.
Well, it is for certain that Aradia edited every single episode in this book that came out. Yes.
This was also the book where I was finishing up with publishing the show episodes.
Right.
The deep dives. Those were coming out during this book. So yeah, I think I was relying on you sometimes because I was like crunching through that edit process. And yeah, but the transition was happening somewhere
quite a
around
bit before
last
that. Yeah.
transition. So yeah, this last book, I did edit all of it. And someone on social media, I forget where because it's been like 2 weeks, but someone said that they could tell that I was editing it.
Yeah, because it's better.
Before I ever said anything. They're like, by the way, I could tell because I like your edit style and it's better. And I could tell that something had changed before you said anything. And it made me feel really good about my desire to monetize my editing skills. So you know who you are out there. Thank you for that comment. That was validating.
Yeah, and I actually wrote down too that like during this, towards the beginning, we could see when the art changes over to Lillijen taking over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the book of Lillijen's art really being the theme and me not having to look for stuff randomly. And there was a nice collage posted in chat of all of the art together. So that's pretty cool.
And I counted a total of 28 episodes to get this book done. Which is just about the same as 29 for Path of Daggers.
Yeah, because we were slogging. We did a lot of doubling up of chapters. That was something I noted in this book. We did a lot of double headers, and that makes sense that we compressed it to Path of Daggers length.
Yep. 1, 2, 3.
And that's, you know, compared to some of the early, I think Lord of Chaos, we're doing 50, 60, maybe even up to 70 episodes per book. It's the density is just completely different, which is, it's clearly a result of the slog and the fact that a lot of these characters aren't necessarily characters that we are able to talk about again.
I count 6 double headers, and the first 3 are all Perrin.
Because it's Perrin and Fail's plotline of doom getting off the ground.
Because what I see is I've done a wolf with a falcon and rainbow swirl, which is, I think, the first time we get Perrin seeing the swirl of colours, which is Rand and Matt. And then I've got Winter's Heart 3 and 4, a falcon in a cage, and Winter's Heart 5 and 6, which is a wolf, a falcon, and a hawk.
Yeah,
that's all Perrin. And then the next one looks like an Elaine one because it's a palace shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't double up again until Winter's Heart 32 and 33. Oh no, Winter's Heart 20 and 21, which is again a bird. But I've got handcuffs and an handcuff, so I'm assuming that's something to do with the Sean Chan as well and the Adarm. And then, 32 and 33 in Farmadding, which we've just done.
Yeah, it was sloggy there at the start.
Well, and especially, this book has, instead of skipping between characters and then going back to them, each character gets their segment, and then we move on to never see that character again. And so there's a lot of sort of binning of chapters together because it's essentially one storyline, and we were choosing where to cut rather than, sticking to where the chapters chose to cut.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of editorializing, and we will continue. to do a lot of editorializing.
Oh man, what do you guys think about the idea of splitting up the final chapter and smearing it across Crossroads of Twilight?
I think it's going to be fun, but really confusing.
Okay.
Just in terms of, if you're someone who likes to have, organized chunks, having to flick back. But I think Aradia said last time that she's got timestamps for the audiobook, which will help those people.
Yes, thanks
and
to
I suppose it's too hard to do page numbers for the books because of how many variants there are.
Yeah, I mean, I can do the mass market paperback because that's what I got. But, not every format.
And certainly the POVs are a little easier to just jump through, but you can count through them pretty quickly. But, it'll certainly be a little bit more confusing. But because the events are concurrent in the series, I feel like that's going to add a certain immediacy as we jump back and forth. Yes, we are jumping back and forth in location, but not necessarily in time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the art.
We will
Yes,
see.
it will be.
What you could also do regarding the book is say it's, from the beginning until the first or the second character switch, because pretty much at least within the same character or the same, chunk of whoever point of view, it's that same period of time. So you could say through Rand's first point of view and Nynaeve's or whatever, and just jump around that way. I don't know if that would be.
Yeah, we'll definitely
I don't know how much more extra work that would put on you, though.
No, we'll be anchoring the timelines together because I think that's part of our frustration with the way it was originally done. So yeah, it's going to be hopefully very anchored. We'll see, though. I mean, us in 6 months might be laughing very hard at this conversation.
We're like, wow, that was a mistake. Whoa. Whew.
Yeah.
We should have just handled that all at once. That's certainly a possibility, but you got to take risks every once in a while. And I think we've played with order of events successfully in the past. I feel like doing the Aiel visions through the Terangrial were very successful in reverse order, sort of straightening those out and sort of putting it back into timeline order. And I feel like that's how we're trying to do this as well, sort of be like, these events are actually taking place at the same time, so we're going to talk about them at the same time.
Yeah.
I forgot about that episode. That was a fun episode.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
I've seen them referenced in the wild before, too, just out and about on the internet, because it's just such a, make it make sense kind of take on that rather confusing sequence.
Mm-hmm. And I think that even goes back to when Rand is sick from the channeling sickness in book 1, right? Jordan liked to play with these order of events, and sometimes the podcast has been able to sort it out. Telling people that there was a flashback, I think, was one of the early successes of the podcast, because a lot of people didn't realize that's what hadn't sorted out that order of events. And so, yeah, I really, really do enjoy playing with unraveling the timeline.
Sorry if I look distracted. I'm just playing with today's graphic.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Something that was happening in the podcast sort of life also when this book started was we were getting really used to having our ads in it. Last book was the transition into having them, and getting into this book was this is a rhythm now. This is something I've worked out, and, it was kind of making the impact it was going to make with the people who were going to make noise about it. And that was also the beginning of this book back in June, was wow, we're really doing this. We're starting to get paid for it. That whole process.
Do you know exactly what date in June you did the first recording for this set of books?
I believe it was June 23rd.
So I was in the middle of having COVID. That explains why I was doing the graphic.
Thank you, COVID.
COVID really does change everything.
Yeah. Because I was if it was June in the middle of last year, there was a reasonable chance that, yes, I was just having or getting over COVID. So I would have sat down to do this because it's a low energy activity. And I would have just been distracted enough that I wanted to do things. And then the first graphic I've done for this is the black cat on the fluffy unicorn. And I remember there being a conversation about that cat in particular, so I went to find it specifically, and then I had to do something with it, and thus, it happened.
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember finding a few different cats on unicorns, and then that one I was like, oh, hold on. Brain going bing, doing an ADHD going, oh, I can do something with this. Let us channel this energy.
God, it's been excellent ever since. But that's hilarious. I forgot that was the one. Cat.
The only difference for me this past 6 months is I actually also started a new job. We did a lot of changes during Path of Daggers, and I feel like Winter's Heart is when we've really settled into them. So for me, I had a new job, which has totally changed, my trajectory of my life in a lot of interesting ways, in terms of like I'm on a career path now as opposed to before where I just was working some jobs and doing the podcast as sort of a main thing. This has really become Aradia's in a lot of ways now owns this podcast because I have this new job. And it's been really rewarding to me to see just how successful she's been with it.
You've really done the American dream on that. You just manage it now.
It's really great.
Do the work.
It's fantastic.
Show up once a week, do a little
Show
work,
up, bullshit, and I let somebody else do all the work. It's been super nice. Well, you know what they say about the investor class: we're job creators. Trickle down
podcastnomics.
Exactly. But yeah, no, it's been nice to be able to pass the vast majority of the income onto Aradia and make sure that I'm only taking a percentage because she's doing the majority of the work.
99% is a percentage. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, guys. He pays me very well. I make more money in this company.
Well, yeah. So it's been a huge difference for me to not have almost every day dedicated to the podcast. It's really just one day a week for me now, and I miss the Wheel of Time in a lot of ways because I'm not thinking about it as much as I normally do, as I did before, I should say.
Was this the book where you dropped back to once a week, or was that the book before?
Yes, this would have been that book because we were doing twice a week because of doing the deep dive episodes, and those petered out, I believe, near the beginning of this book. So this is when we transitioned back down.
So, but me and Aradia have always done once a week, I believe, with our recordings.
Yeah.
We never did 2 a week.
Only when we were trying to deal with the show.
Only when we were trying to deal with the show, yeah, and that was a whole. And we took a significant break during the show from making the actual podcast. That's why, like, if you look at Path of Daggers, it actually took us 8 months because we took about a 2-month break in there, even though we produced about the same number of episodes. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then it took us a long time to process that. It took us nearly a year to get those episodes out.
Yeah, but you called it your white whale when I got the last one published. You're like, you have conquered my white whale.
God. I tried so many times on those in so many different ways to get those episodes out, and I think the video was just never going to work. And so we had to... I think once we made the decision to go audio only, it was doable. And then at that point, Aradia was doing all the editing, so I handed her the audio.
I learned a lot crunching through them.
You crushed through them really fast. I think you figured out, like, you automated a lot of the editing that you do on those episodes.
I leveled up my overall comprehension of the editing process a lot because of doing that.
I remember watching the lives for the deep dives, and it's like, they were so long. They were huge.
Yeah.
They were huge, yeah.
Yeah, 2.5 hours per recording, which covered half of each episode.
A third sometimes.
It was too much.
They were exhausting to watch.
So that means that you did watch them.
Yes, that's all.
Yeah, season 2 will not be getting that level of treatment from us.
No, it won't. No, we'll be doing our I can imagine us doing reaction videos like we did when the show dropped initially. But again, probably not even videos, right?
Not 6 hours, not videos.
Not 6 hours, not videos.
You'll get 2 hours, probably.
I said 30 minutes, okay? That's all. Which means 2 hours.
Which means
all right,
2 hours, yeah.
That's fine. Okay. I believe the initial concept for this podcast was to do like a 30-minute episode on each chapter or something like that. Maybe 45. But if you look at the early episodes, they're significantly shorter.
Yeah, you guys start lengthening out. Your stride gets longer around book 2, book 3. It starts to be like, hour and a half. That's becoming about average instead. Interesting. And then I got into the picture. The other fun thing that happened in the summer was WatCon. Sort of show-related, fandom-related, community-related. WatCon was in July. And that was fabulous.
That was fabulous. And sort of a new level of our relationship with Michael Kramer and Kate Redding.
They showed up in person and they mingled.
They mingled and socialized, and it was insane. Yeah, and we all got a little starstruck. I certainly did. That was
amazing. I don't know how I'm going to manage to pull all my ducks in a row together to do going to WatCon again. I have no idea, but man, that was fun.
It was so much fun.
Such a good thing to do in the middle of July.
So, although I'm not sure about going to Ohio right now, I hear they're having some explosions.
No, only if you're so poor that you live along the railroad tracks.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Oh man, your country is a mess.
But freedom.
Yeah, but our freedoms. So yeah, there's that. We did bring a little more politics and sort of modern stuff.
WatCon was fun. And
WatCon was fun.
Yeah. JediPants, are we likely to see you at a convention sometime?
After I get my dissertation, after I get my doctorate, start my dissertation this summer. So I originally signed up for WatCon and then, but like last year, and then like a week later, I was like, maybe I'll get my doctorate. It was almost a spur of the moment decision. I sat on the decision for maybe a month and I'm like, I think I should get my doctorate, and showing different people the program. They're like, that's you. And I'm like, guess I'm doing this. And I got accepted and I'm like, can't go to WatCon because I run on very, very high anxiety if I don't know what something is going to be like. Now, granted, I know that the 6 weeks of working on chapter 1 of my dissertation is going to be very high levels of stress. It's a 3-year long program, and it's just one class after another, after another, after another. So it's just how the program's designed. So I have 6 weeks to fully finalize chapter 1 of my dissertation. And then I start chapters 2 and 3. I finalize chapters 2 and 3 next year. So they spread it out, which is nice, but like, I'm not going to any conventions if they fall. I'm not doing much of anything if they fall anywhere during these times. Like even for family events, I'm like, that's a Sunday while I'm start my next class. I'm not doing anything. So I need to know what I'm doing and where I am, and then I do heavy front loading. So like I finished everything for my current course in the first 2 weeks. And my professor thinks I'm crazy. So, which I am.
Sounds practical to me.
It means that I can do something like this because I'm not worried about my main assignment due tomorrow because I've finished already. I've uploaded it. I'm just waiting on feedback, and now I can actually do this.
It's an interesting strategy to handle the anxiety, is just make sure that everything's done so you don't have to be anxious about it in the future.
It's been very helpful with family emergencies and stuff too.
I flip between that and the main ADHD way of doing things, which is at the last possible second. So I when I'm doing my choir stuff, I front load all of the planning. So I decide this is the repertoire we're going to sing, and I actually managed to do up a yearly calendar for my choir this year, which is like magic. So I know when our performances are going to be, instead of just going, we should do a performance in the next 3 months, which is how it's been the last couple of years. So I've actually managed to organize that much. So I know what we're singing when, but I've not done any of the recordings to go with it, because I do sing-along recordings and stuff for the choir. So I've sort of front-loaded the ideas, and then we last-minute the execution. And I can't find a middle ground, so I'm just rolling with it.
That sounds like me. Definitely. Mm-hmm. I'm so good at planning everything. That was how I always, like, my first week in school would just be nothing but planning out the whole term. Because, like, there's nothing to do in the first week of classes anyway. It's just like, have you read the syllabus? No, here's what the syllabus said. So, like, I would plan out my entire term down to, like, the minute. And then, yeah, like, by the end of term, I was doing everything at the last minute. But, like, according to a plan that 10 weeks ago me had set up. So it was fine.
I just tend to walk and push on each little thing that I need to do and see if I can do a little bit of it. And then and then sometimes it'll move a lot and sometimes it only moves a little bit. But my anxiety is just going around and checking on all the things I have to do repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again, even if they're in a waiting state. I can't not check on that over and over and over again. So that's where my anxiety comes in. And that does help me sometimes move quickly on things, but also it wastes tons of time that I could spend being actually productive rather than checking on my various tasks
and
that
energy.
I should be doing. And energy, yeah. Yeah, it's strategies, man. That's... But yeah, sometimes I can be very productive if I'm actually hitting all those things at the right time and pushing on them in the right way. So,
Jedi, are you comfortable sharing what you're disserting on?
Nothing is finalized or set in stone, but what I want to do is look at the interdisciplinary nature of mathematics and not just how it relates to other STEM subjects, but also how it relates to all the subjects. And I want to base it around a project that I do in my discrete math class where the students do very, very heavy research on a piece of NASA technology and the mathematics and the science behind it, and also how the technology has been improved on and developed over time, but it was essentially mainly first used by NASA. And then they also build or create a prototype. It does not have to be working. No one's ever created anything working before. It doesn't have to be 3D. It could be a 2D model. It could be a digital model. I don't care. You're still creating a model. So the project in and of itself is getting, yes, the math and the science. It's getting the technology because they're researching the technology and then creating the technology in some way. So that's got the engineering aspect, but then it also has the history, the social studies aspect, and it's English because if they are using incorrect English, while I'm not an English teacher, so I'm not 100% focused on the ELA portion of it, they still need to write a comprehensive paper. And I want to I have come to better articulate over the past year that I actually don't like mathematics. I don't like pure mathematics. I used to hate math, but I started to like math in 6th grade when my teacher required us to do 2 research papers and create what we were doing research on. So I built an abacus and I did a Mancala set. So I don't like math. I like the algebra, I like the calculus, but what I really like is how that can be applied. So looking into the interdisciplinary nature, hopefully from a more qualitative aspect instead of quantitative, because I don't like quantitative stuff for being a math teacher. That's very weird. But that's what I want to look into and talk about and research and do my studies on.
That's so cool.
And completely incomprehensible to someone who does music maths, which is count to 4 lots.
I found a really cool article that I didn't 100% read through because it didn't relate to anything that I was doing my research on, but it was talking about the music, how mathematics, interdisciplinary nature of mathematics and music, and how it also can relate to like history stuff too. So
I feel like you're doing a doctorate on the question my students always used to ask me, which is, why do I have to learn this? How am I ever going to use this in real life? Whenever I try and teach them anything, it was their favorite delaying tactic. And I wanted to be like, I don't have a great answer for that because I really love the math, the pure math, and I don't have a good answer for why you should learn it. And I came up with various versions of it, but I never really felt happy and satisfied with the answer that I had. And I feel like you're doing just a whole dissertation on these here. This is it.
My concept of sort of maths and science, I think it was a Tumblr post I saw, which was basically when you pick up like an opaque bottle, so not one of these, but an opaque bottle, and you shake it to find out how much liquid is still left in it, that's maths and that's science, and there's a whole computation going on there that you don't even see, and that is kind of fascinating. But the actual like math is, my brain just it just don't do.
My favorite is that we can catch balls that are flying in a parabolic arc, and we can do that calculation to figure out exactly where it's going to land based on the current location. And like that map, that's, our brains are doing something to figure out that location. It's not math, but it's kind of is math, right?
It's not math.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. For sure. Sure.
Whereas my brain looks at a flying object and goes, I don't have the visual processing cortex for this, and then I get hit in the face.
That would be me as well. Yeah, I bounced off of doing geology as my major because I couldn't execute math at the college level the way they needed me to pass physics. It was like, I can't do this academically. I can understand it. I cannot perform it to an academic standard. So I'm going to go over to geography, where I get to do the interdisciplinary thing of, well, this is how it's all connected. No, I have no idea where north is. Like, that's what
North is up.
Right, exactly.
That's right. North is whatever direction you are facing.
Yeah, it's just being able to go interdisciplinary and just say it's all connected allowed me to just sort of smooth over all my math deficiencies with words and be like, no, it's storytelling. You don't need to worry about the numbers. It's just a ratio. It's fine.
Hands up if you are the person who rotates the map so the road is in the same direction that you are.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do that on Google Maps, right? It's got to rotate with you. That's when you zoom in.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could zoom out, but that drives me absolutely nuts when I just see the dot moving. I'm not Pac-Man. I'm
not playing Snake.
Right.
Yeah.
I have friends who are like, just go west on that road. I was like, which direction is west? Guide me by landmarks.
Yeah, I learn it, like, when I go to a new place, I will, like, find, like, a few fixed points and be like, okay, I know that building is west. So that way, just, on campus, right, you're always orienting around that. But, like, go to a new place and it's like, I'm lost. Like, my mom, she knows where north is. She just, like, magnetically knows where north is. I go to a new place, I'm like, you spin me around. I have no idea. None.
You want me to get somewhere, guide me by, like, that petrol station and the weird tree and the house with the blue roof.
I do like north, south, east, west here in like a city like I'm in Portland because, I know there's number streets. I know the number streets are heading east-west. So if I'm on a number street, I'm heading east-west. If they're going up, I'm heading east. If they're going down, I'm heading west. And then I can orient myself north-south very easily. And so, at least when someone's like, start heading in this direction, I can usually figure that out. And then turn left, right. But you have to start in the right direction, right? Or else the lefts and the rights aren't going to make any sense.
Yeah, that's how my husband is in New York City. He's like, oh, the these streets do that and those streets do that. And I'm like, you could tell me 15 different times and I still don't understand. Like, I'm never going to internalize that.
It's because I look at the map and I can picture the map in my head and I can see the numbers going horizontally. And so I know that's an east-west. Because the map always points up, north.
If we want to talk about the books at all, Elaine is in Andor a lot in the middle of this book. we have a lot of Elaine winding up her succession plot and all of its divisively boring glory. I don't know if I'm being convinced that it's any more fun just because we're podcasting through it, but I'm trying.
There were tidbits that I enjoyed, right? There were things that I was able to pull out of it. There were, I think for me, one of the reasons I wanted to do this book is I wasn't sure if I was missing something, right? Is there some brilliance of Robert Jordan's in the background of the Slog where these characters are connected, or there's some details that I'm missing? And I feel like I pulled out a few, but I'm much happier now having done this book that I know everything that he was trying to do in this book. Whereas before I felt like, am I missing something? Like, is there something that I'm not quite getting out of this book that I should be? And I'm not. Is my answer. It didn't really change how I felt about the book. It changed a little bit about how I felt about Robert Jordan writing it. And for me, it's clear that he had these chunks where he needed each character to do something. And he wrote each chunk, and it didn't get, and also from what I know have learned outside the books that, he really didn't give his editors a lot of time between when he finished writing and when the book needed to be published. And so I really do think that the Slog is more a failure of editing than a failure of writing.
And it is very real nonetheless.
And it is real. Like that's the other thing. The Slog does exist. And people who say it doesn't exist, I think, there's aspects about these books that are different than the previous books. The fact that characters aren't nearly as recurring. There are far more characters. You don't bounce around between different plot lines. You have to stick with one plot line for multiple chapters. So you don't get all these cliffhanger endings that you get to jump back into. The fact that, some of the characters don't appear to do a lot in those chunks. A lot of what they need to do is get ready to do something. So, yeah, I think it does exist. And I think it's just an aspect of having a really exciting beginning where all the characters are changing into who they want to be, and a really exciting ending. And you need something to bridge those two. And like in a lot of trilogies, the middle movie is kind of the crappy movie because you need something to bridge the exciting introduction of the characters and the exciting final movie. And sometimes that's just very utilitarian.
But let me ask our guests, did the podcast slog as it got through the slog?
I didn't find it sloggy, but I'm busy during the whole thing, picking up on little bits and pieces that you're saying and trying to wrap them in. So I've got my brain split basically in two halves. So I was entertained. I don't know about anyone else.
And I think that having multiple double headers was helpful. So it took 3 episodes to get through the prologue, but we needed those 3 episodes. And then after that, it picked up and went by really fast. Like, yeah, it took a few months still, but it still felt like it flew by because of the double headers. So I felt like it was actually, a little less sloggy because you were like, and some politics happened. And then Elaine did this. And oh, look, it's Perrin again. And now we're at Matt. And oh, the pink ribbons. So it was because of the nature of the podcast and you're not poring over every single word that it felt perhaps less sloggy.
Yay. That was the goal.
Yeah, jumping off the high points and avoiding the valleys was the goal. So I think that sounds like we successfully did that.
Still don't like Perrin.
Well,
this is such a sloggy book for him. It's awful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Plotline of doom is real doomy on this book, for sure.
And he just annoys me overall. Like,
same.
okay, I understand. I am not saying that you should not be worrying over your wife. That is not what I'm saying at all. However, he's like, I don't care what happens. I'm gonna throw everything. I don't care if we, Tarmangaiden. It doesn't matter. I need to get her back right now. If it doesn't, I don't care. Dark One might kill me. I don't care. I need to get her back. And I'm like, dude, seriously, like there are bigger things sometimes. I understand he didn't know what she was doing. And also we can't trust the Shido, but it was just such a single-minded focus, and it didn't feel like too many people. And I'm coming at this from a teacher perspective too. There are times when some of my students have a very, very, very just focus, and I can at least talk to them and have a conversation with them. And I might not be able to talk them down fully, but I can still like have them ease back a little bit. And it didn't seem like anyone was, they were just letting him, oh, that's Perrin for you. Like, I guess we're following him. And it was just, certain things just irritate me. It also doesn't help that he's a fictional character, so I could get as pissed off at him as I want. And so I'm like, well, if this was real life, it'd be different. But
Fair enough.
Perrin definitely needed someone to just walk up to and go, call the goddamn wambulance. We have shit to do. Which is how I feel about him in general.
Yeah. And we're not even to that part of his plot yet. This really, in this book, was just the like, so you know how boring and terrible this feels? Hold that thought.
Yeah. I think that's part of what makes this sort of middle section sloggy, is we get Perrin's a crybaby, lots of other things happen, and then we come back to Perrin's a crybaby, and then more things happen. And in between that, we have Elaine is being a queen. And then we get to Elaine is being a queen, but worse.
Right. But pregnant and invincible. Yeah.
So, yeah. There's just... I think these few books in the middle here are like... Everyone's personality is dialed up to like 95 on the worst possible traits meter. And we don't get that relief of... Okay, Rand is the Dragon Reborn and he's going through some stuff, but maybe he makes a little joke or something, or enjoys a party, or goes, oh, this is a nice cup of tea. But we don't get any of that relief of the characters having relief.
There's no Loyal.
Well, also that.
Yeah, he's off sealing the gates.
Yeah.
And we don't get those little interactions even in the background. Even Min is like full focus on the horrible.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Though the exception to that in this book is Matt, who is peak Matt, has some of his best scenes, his best flair. Like, as long as you ignore what's happening to him with Tylan, this is Matt in some of his most quintessential moments.
And I think maybe the fact that we don't get Matt spaced out, because none of the characters are spaced out really well.
Right.
We go a little bit instead of a more gentleness, I guess.
If we had just Matt and Rand, I think this would be considered a really good book. Right? The two of them are both very entertaining and very good and fan favorites. It's just all the other padding and all the other filler that just feels like it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, we bring Bail Domon back in Matt's plot. That's how excellent Matt's plot is it has freaking Bail Domon and Egyanan coming back into the story. Like, that's good. It's not sloggy.
And a great little escape plot that's set up with all these characters coming together who then have influence later on. And there's the whole Tuon, like,
Noel, the Golem. It's just,
it's so good. And then, Rand with the cleansing, the thing we've been waiting for him to do since we first discovered there was a taint, right? Like, he does it. Like, that's the two very amazing things, which I think is why Winter's Heart is frequently rated above Crossroads of Twilight, right? Because it has these two very important, very interesting sections that Crossroads feels like it doesn't.
Yeah, I had written in my notes that when I did a reread of Wheel of Time in 2021, that I was initially planning on it, but then your podcast really sparked me to keep moving and to finish it. when I got to Winter's Heart, I was looking at it and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember hating this book and dreading it. Then I got to it and I'm like, I mean, the Perrin's a little slow, and it was the politics that really dragged me. And I got to the Matt parts, and I mean, Matt shines here. And then in the next book, I was like, this is the one that's dragging. So when I reread again last year, I was really looking forward to Winter's Heart. So I'm like, but every time I look at this cover, actually the spine, it's like weird, like not flashbacks and not PTSD, but it's like and then I have to, remind myself, no, you actually like this book. It's okay.
It's like a Pavlovian response.
Like this book. It's the next one that's bad. Or sloggy, more sloggy.
Yeah, which is funny because I agree. Like the art of Crossroads of Twilight, I always feel like, ooh, this one. But like all those feelings are more rightly assigned to the weird winter one. That I don't. That artwork does not spark joy.
And then there's The Knife of Dreams, which is just a whole breath of fresh air. You're back to Jordan the way he was. These characters are developing. They're having good times and bad times, and events are going forward. And it's just like, oh, this is, and then the last battle is getting set up, like we are getting ready for the last battle. And you're like, okay, this is what we've been waiting for really the last 2.5 books, is this sort of explosion of activity. And I think, for me, it was a real moment where I went, okay, this series is still good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm recommitting to it. I was starting to lose faith, but it's all good again. Yeah. So
what do you think about the other news that came out from author Brandon Sanderson that Lanfear is alive and fooled Perrin? Since we're talking about Perrin being sort of boring, does that affect your sort of perspective of Perrin at all? Are you accepting that as canon, or are you just going like, that's a retro, I'm just assuming she's dead, and that's been my headcanon this whole time?
Well, my position has always been, if it's not in the book or can't be directly inferred from the book, it doesn't exist. And I feel the same way about the shows that I write fan fiction for. Like, when I'm doing it, I'm either filling a gap that I can see is there. It's like an empty hole and I can put something of my own creation in there. Or I am going, well, this is the story that we got, and everything after that is my imagination. So I haven't bought the Origins book, and I don't have the big book of art or any of that sort of supplementary stuff. Because for me, the books are the story. If you can look at Perrin and go, oh, it was clear that something was messing with him, and I don't know, Lanfear was in his mind spiking up his emotions. If you can find me evidence for that, then great. That's a wonderful theory, and I will consider adopting that. This, like we do with headcanoning Elaine and Avienda being a couple. It's not on the page, but there's enough supplementary evidence on the page that a case can be made. Like I said, I don't remember big chunks of the books because of the way that I read them, but I don't remember seeing any good evidence for Lanfear ever having been in Perrin's head.
I think Matt Hatch was the only one who did.
Yeah. and I don't like that they use that as evidence that, like, oh, one of the beta readers saw that and so decided that, and so therefore it's obvious, and because one person saw it, and it's like, okay, did he see it, or did he just find that the writing for Lanfear wasn't that great, and they just sort of said, okay, but that's because X, Y, and Z,
I write lots of stuff in my stories that don't make the final cut because they don't fit.
Right.
And whether that was Jordan's plan or not, in the end, it didn't fit. So he went...
For me, I could take it or leave it. I'm just like, okay, that works. So, like, I care so little for Perrin. I think that could be why. Or it could just be that I'm like, okay, now that it's been explained to me, I can see that. And Lanfear is Lanfear. So I don't think it takes away from Perrin's arc, because he is still him. And even if I am being influenced without realizing it, by someone, in the end, my decisions are still my decisions. And he is so headstrong that I can't see Lanfear actually fully
wouldn't be able to get her claws into him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the end, a weave is it's just a weave. So
right.
He's got such a, I can't think of the word that I want to use.
Graendal and Nynaeve, how it wouldn't stick. Was it Graendal or Megedian? And the girls at the meeting.
Yeah, Megedian.
Yeah, so she got it in there, but it didn't stick. And Perrin, I think, is actually more headstrong than Nynaeve, which is saying something.
Mm-hmm. Typical blacksmith.
So Lanfear would have had to be there every day refreshing it, like Halima had to. She had to be there every day refreshing it just to keep it, barely active. And there wasn't that person around Perrin, unless we're deciding, somehow Lanfear was Berylane, but that's not going to work because it's, not true. She was off busy being, Selena or whatever at this point.
Yeah. Maybe that's what Vannon actually was. He's not Demon Dread. He's actually Lanfear.
That would explain. Oh, okay. And she's using the fat trick twice, right? She used it with Kylie, and now she's using it with Vannon. Yeah, and that's sure.
That's why she's with Matt all the time, is so she can get close to Perrin. That totally tracks.
That totally makes sense.
That's totally being on opposite sides of the country right now is absolutely working for that.
Yeah, super solid.
No, and for me, I don't have a lot of interest in what happens to characters after this whole what happens to them after the book series is over. I'm like, nothing. It's they're fictional characters. The book series is over. They don't continue to live their lives. Yeah, there's nothing going on at that point. And I know we all like to live, believe in the happily ever after, and think about what these characters would have done in that world if it kept going. But at that point, you're just writing fan fiction.
Yeah, it's post-canon. It's post-canon AU.
Yeah.
And so, that to me, I'm like, okay, Lanfear's alive. Great. Maybe somebody who's writing some post-canon AU will incorporate that into some stories and write something interesting about it. But that's about as far as it affects me.
Yeah. I'm glad we're all agreed that this is an ambivalent decision at best and a bad one at worst.
So then I guess the other announcement that I think would be interesting to talk about is...
Nakomi?
Thank you. Nakomi. And her revelation as being an avatar of the creator and a former... I don't know if I'd say the last of the Genaiel, but... descended from Genaiel.
Of the last Genaiel?
Of the last Genaiel, yeah.
I always figured something funky was up with her. So, because clearly something funky is up with that. But I don't hate it. I must admit, I always figured Avienda fell asleep and got a dreaming of some sort. Mm-hmm. So, for some reason, just at that moment, she fell into the Dreamwalker space. For plot reasons. I am totally happy with that being Avienda fell asleep, touched Teleamra, the dream space. And then the creator went, bonk. I'm actually really happy with that as an explanation. I don't hate it.
Okay.
So, a Genaiel walking the dream space, touching Avienda's mind at a critical point in time. Totally on board with that. Whether or not she's the creator's avatar, I can take or leave that bit.
Sort of the anti-Shadar Haran, right? Although not in any way directly opposed to him, because there's no opposition that happens there between the two of them.
More or less. So, I can work my way around the Genaiel having, doing the mystic culture thing and just retreating into a small space for whatever reason, or somehow managing to save themselves into Tar, the way that, not dissimilar to Bajita and all of that sort of stuff. She exists in that space. I always figured she was just in that space, Hunter of the Horn style, and just dropped in at a key moment because that was her destined thing to do.
Do you think that has anything to do with why Ruidian wasn't accessible in the dream world until Rand had his fight with Asmodean there?
Yeah. They sort of retreated into that space in another format. Was sort of how I always worked around that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense that some place can be blocked off in the real world and in Tel'aran'rhiod. I mean, I don't know, I can't remember if steadings are or not, if you can enter a steading area. I don't know if we ever...
No, you cannot.
So that's a sort of a similar thing. It's like a little bubble away from the world. And it makes sense that the Gen Aiel, seeing the corruption of the other Aiel, would retreat into a bubble away from the world, and when that bubble isn't enough, they would retreat again. To me, anyway.
Just like with the Lanfear thing. I'm like, okay, cool. I see that. Moving on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am quite apathetic towards a lot of things that I maybe shouldn't be apathetic towards, but I'm like, okay.
It's
cool.
It's still post-canon for me, so I don't accept it as in the text, but I can at least see that one working in the way that I can't see the Lanfear one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like there's contextual clues for it.
Yeah.
Certainly that she's Gen Aiel, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's something I, as well as many other people, have called out many, many times, that she appears to be Gen Aiel. And it appears that she's in the dream world.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how when Origins dropped, you know, which is another thing that happened over the course of this book, was Origins dropping and us getting to read it. Like, the number of things that were presented as a very big deal that have been met with a lot of shrugged shoulders and meh, that, like, were hyped up. And then we get really, really, really into things that are, like, very minor. Like, in that same book, you know, like, there's so many details that we've all gotten really into during recordings, but, like, these big, huge ticket items that Matt Hatch is commenting on, we're just like, meh.
You guys were really excited about the map, the new map.
Yeah,
Yes.
The map is amazing.
The new map. The map is great. The map makes a lot more sense. The map solves a lot of the problems that we had with the maps. And it's nice to get the backstory that Jordan didn't like the original maps and was asking for them to be changed. And the changes just never got made, you know? So that's, I think that we're very happy about that.
But it's made such a smaller splash.
Because there's canon support.
And I do think there's a lot, and Origins was an interesting book for me because it didn't change any of the canon. Right? Because what it was saying is, this is where Robert Jordan came up with the name. He then altered it, stretched it, changed it, put it in the books, and created a whole different storyline.
And also, part of this mythical character or, you know, folklore or even just like real event, this happened... This was attached to this person. This part was attached to this event in Wheel of Time. This part was attached to this other character. So we saw a lot of segmenting of different real world things.
Right. And
that was cool. It was very tough getting through that glossary, but I was like, I need to know. And of course, I'm a lunatic reading. I need to read from A to Z.
Yeah. Well, the audiobook was a savior for me on that one. Michael Kramer reading that was so much better than trying to read it on my own, because then I could just sort of tune out and listen for the interesting little tidbits that came in. And there were lots of interesting tidbits in there. But again, I don't think anything in Origins changed my opinion about what happened in Wheel of Time.
And we've seen the way that Jordan's done that mishmash thing the whole way through. I mean, the first time the Aiel appeared when I was reading the books the first time, I was like, oh, it's Scotsman in the Sahara. Great, let's go.
Yeah.
So we've always seen him do that.
Even at WalkCon last year, I mean, we did a whole panel, like, not... like, it was kind of inspired by the fact that this book was coming out, but, like, it was so easy to pull together a panel of, like, let's just talk about the things that we can see. I mean, Seth and I have found things on the podcast. Like, this Origins of the Wheel of Time is, like, one of our favorite, like, as a pattern-seeking fandom, we notice these things, and we love this stuff. And, like, the book is almost underwhelming because it's like, well, here's the official, and it's like, but our headcanons were more fun, rather than just like, yeah, he took the word coxswain and changed it to cadswain because she's steering the boat. Like, okay, but okay.
Okay.
I was more interested in learning more about Robert Jordan. Like some of the stuff I knew, but I'm not a big like Jordan fan. I know everything about him inside and out. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting.
You're right.
It was
Yeah.
just really neat to, because I mean, you guys have talked about, you know, the whole Loki aspect and the whole Thor aspect, or even there was the book that was mentioned in one of the chapters in this book, and you're, oh, maybe you know this character is named after the author of that book, and even though it wasn't. Yeah. So it's a, you know, we can piece through a lot of it, or if I personally can't, like we as a fandom can piece through a lot, but those personal details we might not know. So.
And it was nice to see them all compiled in one place. You know, a lot of those stories came from people who are, of course, know him and show up to cons and tell those stories. So, you know, it's funny, a lot of the stories I feel like I heard in Watt Origins, I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard Jason Denzel tell the story. Oh, yeah, I've heard Harriet tell that story. Oh, yeah, I've heard, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a very privileged way to come at this because I've been to the cons and I've talked to these people and I've heard the stories. And I'm glad they're out there in a way that's more consumable by the public and more well documented. But you're right. I've again felt just a little underwhelmed by them, just because, not because they aren't great stories, but because I've heard the Iceman story. I'm aware of it, so I was sort of looking for the new details in the books, and I didn't see as many as I would have hoped. But at the same time, you know, a man's life can only have so many interesting details that you can remember and bring up. You know, it's we're not going to find out that Robert Jordan was this whole different person that we didn't know about, who, you know, didn't fight in you know, a war, and, you know, it wasn't 6'9" or however tall he actually was.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
You know, like, we know these things about him, and they've affected the way we've perceived the books for a long time. I'm glad they're out there, but again, yeah, just didn't really blow me away with new information.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed that I haven't bought it. Put it that way.
Yeah, the collective fandom response is giving you as much as you probably need from it. Right?
And you'll probably find a lot of it on WattWiki anyway. So
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And that's another nice thing about it, is that it is a good physical reference that has a lot less flashing ads. You know, it's like the black book and now this greenish book are both like faster in so many ways than going to the internet, knowing that the information is virtually replicated identically across them. Like, it's nice to have a physical copy that literally doesn't have ads, and that I can annotate when I need to.
Yeah.
Because I will.
Put a sticky note on it going, this bit's rubbish.
I may have possibly done that.
Bullshit. Just big letters.
I do that in the novels. I don't know that I'll do that in the reference materials.
What else is on your list, Miss Aradia?
Farmatting, mainly, just that we show up in farmatting, and we talk a lot about farmatting, and Rand builds his party in anticipation of going to do the cleansing. You know, we've got the whole Fane thing, the Renegade Ashaman thing. That's the other, like, really book segment, because, like, you know, like you were saying, Rand is a big part of this book, and I'm like, no, he's not. And it's because so much of what he does in this book is relevant at the end, which we are pushing to next book. But the farmatting sections are very important for his arc. In bad ways, I'd say. It's mostly a bad trip to farmatting.
One of the things about farmatting for me is the first many times I read the series, I lost track of who all the Ashaman were, and so I didn't realize that Fane had conjured up the dead Ashaman to trick him. I was just like, wait, why are there Ashaman on the stairs and why are they gone now? I don't understand. And that took me a lot of rereads and a lot of effort to try and fully understand what was going on there, and where I actually had to pay attention to the names of what I thought were somewhat irrelevant characters. But those 5 Ashaman, whether or not you want to include Arangar,
Deshiva,
whether or not you want to include Deshiva as those 5. So the 4 Ashaman and Deshiva, are actually pretty important. But they come as a group, right? So it's like, you don't really have to know them as individuals. You just know them as those 4 Asha'man. And so it becomes difficult to really sort out exactly who they are and which ones are alive and which ones are dead and which ones got stabbed by Fane and which ones Rand killed. And then I also making the connection that Torum Ryatin was the swordmaster that Lan was fighting from 2 books ago, who like wasn't that important back then. That was also something I hadn't really made a connection on. So I feel like really nailing down who those characters were when I read this series helped me realize, oh, okay, this is what Rand is actually doing. He's getting rid of the rebels, sort of wrapping up the storyline from the end of Path of Daggers where they attacked him.
Formatting needed about 20% more Varen, in my opinion, but that would probably have played her hand too early.
Probably.
I think the whole series could use a solid 20, maybe 40, maybe 200% more Varen.
I like that plan.
Yeah.
We lose 20% of Perrin and replace that with Varen.
Yeah. Honestly, just replace Codswain with Varen. I think that would be enough.
Yeah.
To make me
We'd
very
have
happy.
a lot less spanking.
Yes. Yeah. One of the few characters that never engages in spanking.
That would have been a really interesting series if Varen had taken Cadswain's position. Oh.
Can you imagine Varen breaking Semirog?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't do it with
Can you just
beans.
imagine?
I don't know what that would entail, but, like...
Varen guiding Rand through vague little cryptic references and also notating her little flower things, going, oh, Rand, I did hear once that vague Brown-like story, all the while drawing her in a little book, and then, 4 chapters later, Rand is like, I see the light. It would have been, 3 books less in this series.
I was thinking of that meme, the Wheel of Time books, if Varen had been advising Rand.
Because that's the thing. That's what happens. Rand arcs up at everyone trying to push on him. Varen wouldn't have pushed.
And I love the theme of Dark Friends being his advisors, Asmodean, Varen, his conversations with Moradin, even,
Taim?
that he has when they're sort of in the center. Taim, right? Like, all of even going back.
I mean, hell, Lanfear gives him advice that he can use
Ingtar.
in book 2. Ingtar!
Yeah,
Excellent
Ingtar,
example.
right?
That would have made such a cool series theme as the dark fucks itself over, essentially, but nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is kind of the theme in Varen's book.
Evil turns on itself.
Evil is too messy and petty.
Yeah, that's the one I was after.
Do you think they'll get rid of Cadswain in the show?
I hope not.
If we make it that far. Yeah.
Meld the Varen?
I could see them. I don't want them to meld them, but I could totally see the show melding the 2 older, competent ladies with secrets and magic toys into one character. And if Shreya is doing it, I won't even be too mad. Mm-hmm. But I will still be somewhat mad.
I just... The split in books and show is so great at this point. It's hard for me to say... what characters are doing what, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm very curious to. We haven't heard any news about season 2, right? We are more than a year and 4 months past the debut of season 1.
Yeah,
there hasn't been any news since we started this book. Back when we did our last tangents, there hasn't been diddly squat since then.
There has been nothing. There was supposed to be some animated, the origins were supposed to come out, and they never dropped. They announced they were dropping. It wasn't just us thinking they were.
Yeah.
Literally, Amazon announced they were dropping. They never dropped them.
No explanation.
No explanation. So, it's an interesting time to be a Wheel of Time fan and sort of see what, especially with the landscape of television these days being so fraught with cancellations and changes and short seasons. It's really interesting, and I'm very curious to see if how much Wheel of Time we're going to end up getting in the long run.
But we did find out that in season 3 they're going back to Edmund's Field. So.
Yeah. But yeah, if they were to combine Varen and Cadswain, it would be subsuming Cadswain into Varen. Because Varen comes up so much sooner, they would just make Varen more dangerous and competent and maybe even a green. But probably, I think they just...
I could handle that.
I'd be okay with Varen just being scarier. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Just cast Sharia as Varen, and then we'll all know where it's going. It's fine. It's fine.
And I actually would like it if they revealed her as a dark friend earlier and then only revealed that she was a triple agent later. So you think she's a bad guy the whole time and you only realize later that she's actually a good guy.
I mean,
right?
as the books did, the books laid out very clearly by book 6 that she was a dark friend. Or 7 or whatever. But like that line in book 2, like
I still didn't pick that up, even with knowing that she was doing compulsion. I just thought it was Varen's a wilder with some naughty tricks.
Right.
So I didn't pick that up at all because she's so soft.
Yeah, it doesn't break the 3 oaths to do compulsion.
That's true.
You know, and so she could just being naughty, and the lie was close enough to being an eye of the worldism that we were like, is it a lie? Is it just Jordan making a mistake? And but no, if it's
I like the idea of spelling it out sooner though. That'd be fun.
Like
and then saving your dress is green for like the last possible minute. Everything is going to shit, and then like actually Varen meant that the whole time. This is perfect. Like flip it all around.
Right.
What I think would be fun to do with that is if we ever get the Dark Friend social, hearing Varen narrate it rather than Bors.
Oh.
And then 2 to 3 episodes later, pop, up she comes, and we have to link the voice to the face. I think that would be fun, personally.
That would be way more fun than getting into freaking Bors' head, because Carradine is a character. I'm fine not being in his head ever.
Right.
I'm nodding.
But yeah, the idea of having her, because we kind of assumed she was there. I don't know if we ever nailed down exactly which Aes Sedai we thought were there.
No, we don't.
I think Leandrin and Alviarin were the 2 leading candidates for Bors' 2 obvious Aes Sedai. But Varen could always be there and not be an obvious Aes Sedai.
She wouldn't go obvious.
She's clever enough.
Nah.
Right.
Varen's better than that. Varen's not smug and overconfident.
That part.
So I'm assuming she was there, just not one of the 2 obvious Aes Sedai.
Yeah, she was one of the figures who you couldn't even tell the gender. Like, that's who she was.
Short, properly swathed.
Yeah. This was also the last book that we, Seth was pointing out, the last book where we see Fane until his end conclusion, which is so unsatisfying, and I don't like it. So in many ways, this is the last we see of Fane, is him coming to a draw with Rand and running off unsuccessful. And like, next time you see him, he's really some weird Sanderson Mashadar thing, and then he goes away.
Yeah, he's not.
This is the end of Fane. I mean, Fane's one of my favorite nasty villains, like ever. He's so gross.
He's a sweaty, sticky little man.
Fane's ending was the thing I was most disappointed with the first time I read the series.
Same.
I'm less disappointed with it now, but that first time through, I definitely looked at Fane's ending and went, what? That's it? Like, that's the least cool thing that could have happened.
I don't even remember Fane's ending, and I don't know if that's the brain or the writing.
It's the writing.
What happens?
It's so unexciting.
It's basically Fane runs onto the field and is using his Mashadar tentacles to convert everybody to his side. And one of those tentacles stabs Matt, and Matt falls down and pretends to be converted and winks at Perrin, I think, is there.
I don't remember.
And then,
He moves at the camera and breaks the 4th wall for all.
Basically, Fane rides by him. Matt stands up, snatches the dagger, and stabs Fane with it, and Fane dies.
That is very unsatisfying.
Yeah, and it's just Matt's like, oh, I guess I already got the disease, so
Matt's just like, by the way, I'm vaccinated against evil. It's no big deal.
Right.
And it's just like,
No big
that's
deal.
not how vaccinations work, bro.
Right, yeah, that's...
Man, he didn't even, get torn to shreds or exploded. That's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of Egwene's crystals comes up and goes...
Right,
exactly. I thought Egwene was going to take him out. I thought that would have made way more sense. The power of the Amerlin seat just scours the fungal mat out off of the face of the earth.
I would have loved to see him maybe attack Rand during the last battle and get sucked into the Dark One and become part of him or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Case of the screaming Hebes.
Right. He jumps at Rand with the knife and then touches that black void that Rand's heel touches, and he gets sucked in entirely, and he becomes one with the Dark One, and
then Rand can kill the Dark One, but there's still something left behind.
There was always that idea that the Fane was the replacement Dark One if the Dark One died. Yeah, I thought that would be an interesting way to do it too. But yeah, there was so much potential for him there. If nothing else, just for a cooler death.
Yeah, like I get that Fane has to lose, but like it'd be cool if he could lose a little more dramatically.
And it makes sense that Matt takes him out because of the relationship with the dagger and the fact that they both fought over that power. I get where thematically he was coming from, and I see where on paper it seems like a really cool way to like, oh, Fane just got unlucky because Matt got lucky, and that's why that's how he died. Is it's just Matt's anti-luck.
What would have been cooler for that is that Fane goes, hold on, I can still feel Matt, and stalks him down specifically for one final showdown to get that last little nugget back, and still manages to lose. That would have been cooler.
That would have been cool.
So, yeah, he was trying to get the last little bit of... That's what he needed to complete his transition to Mashadar, is that last little bit of Shadow Logoth that still exists in this world and wasn't destroyed by...
Exactly.
The cleansing.
See?
Yeah.
We all just need to be on Brando's advising team. Clearly, we are cooler than he is.
We just need to rewrite those last 3 books.
Yeah. Collectively, I think we are, in fact, a match for Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
Our whole fandom can match one Sanderson.
Not just the 4 of us.
The man's a machine, okay?
Exactly. That's why it takes this many thousands of us.
I left a note to myself, and then I forgot until like right now that I wanted to look up why we actually get bags under our eyes, because that was a topic of conversation on one of the episodes.
I love the brown Aja.
I found something on Mayo Clinic, which is better than like my Cleveland Clinic. And I'm like, I don't know what you are. I know Mayo Clinic. And it was mentioned because of having like thinner skin, and which is normally caused by aging, but it's reduced levels of fatty tissue around the eyes, fluid retention, lack of sleep, genetics, blah blah blah. But it's also like because of having less fat there, as certain things happen, like losing sleep or whatever, it just like stuff pool. Fluid may accumulate below your eyes. So I was like, okay, so the science that was being spouted on the podcast was correct.
We love a good fact check. I try to fact check things before we put them out, but
oh, that, and don't forget that you want to do your Wat Idol song, Jolene.
Oh.
Ooh,
we were going to do...
I did have Wat Idol in my notes. Yeah.
We were going to do Jolene and Matt and Jolene because of this book. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you for reminding us, because every other idea has been trash.
That's really true.
I can't do one myself this year. I've just got absolutely no spoons. Chronic fatigue is kicking my ass. But if you want someone to sing your lyrics for Jolene, totally on board for that.
Excellent. We yes, collaboration.
I'm the opposite. I've got my song down. I did a rough draft of my song. I just need to do some type of I want to do some type of video for it, and not just the lyrics. But
I can help with video too.
I might take you up on that. I am so happy with my lyrics. I'm more happy than I was last year, I think.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I'm excited. I love Wat Idol. Wat Idol is so much fun.
So yeah,
Wat Idol is so much fun.
But yes, I will put that out to all the chat people. If you need vocal, video, or instrumental supplementation for your video, I am more than happy to help other people. I just don't have the creative space to do my own thing this year.
Understandable.
And I will keep that in the recording, because this episode's going to drop with still time to go before the deadline for Wat Idol. So if you're hearing this just recently after it came out, that offer still stands.
Yep, just find me, Lillijen Antipodes, in the chat.
Yes. Excellent. Yeah, so thank you, first of all, to our guests. Really appreciated having you both here for Tangents, and also very much appreciate all of your artistic efforts throughout the podcast. Everyone should make sure to follow our social media so that you can see all the cool art that we've been talking about, because it's very, very neat. We're going to come back next week to start Crossroads of Twilight. We're not going to take a break. It definitely had to have a yelling match with our schedule today, because we had decided live in a recording that we aren't going to take a break, but our schedule didn't reflect that, so I had to fix that. But we will be back next week, starting with Crossroads of Twilight. We will not be doing the splicing together with Winter's Heart for the prologue. We're going to start that with Chapter 1.
Because the prologue is still kind of before the cleansing starts, so...
Yeah, and we have the timestamps for the POVs, so there will be attempting to give you guys road posts for that. And that's basically, that's it. As a reminder, you can join our Patreon for $1 a month and you'll get access to live recordings. For $5 a month, you get ad-free versions of the episodes. And above that, I think you get some cool art stuff that Patreon sends you. And thank you so much to everyone who is a supporter in any way, shape, or form. If you've ever hit like on one of our posts ever, we appreciate you. You are fabulous. And keep reading Wheel of Time, because it's good.
Over and over and over again.
It's cool. Look, it's been a lot of fun doing the art for this book, and, I plan to keep doing it, I guess. There's no reason to stop. You've helped me, and I don't know we've said this in chat a few times, you've helped me get through some terrible insomnia nights. And a lot of other people as well. So keep doing what you're doing. It's good. It's great even.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Of course.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for coming on.
Being in chat and being in my Aja and all that fun stuff. And keep being smart out there and talking about overlap of math and stuff. That's good.
I only pretend to be smart.
Bullshit. I'll tell you that right now. You're smarter than you think you are.
For sure.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?